Martial God Asura. Chapter 1 Outer Court Disciple. Night. The round moon was hanging high and stars filled the sky. However, within the river of stars, there were 9 colored lights lingering amongst them, and they were especially dazzling. Abnormal signs appear in the sky, which means a divine body will descend on the summit of the imperial city in the 9 provinces. An old man in golden clothes stood with his hand behind his back, and he was looking up into the night sky. Behind him were tens of thousands of imperial city experts. All of them were half-kneeled as if waiting for some command. Bzz. Suddenly, the lights condensed and formed into 9 colored lightning. It came striking down from above the river of stars and the heavens. At that instant, the black night became a white day. Even before the strike of the lightning, the ground was already rumbling and fiercely trembling. But that 9-colored lightning, the moment it collided with the land, it did not do any terrifying damage. Rather, it completely disappeared. At the same time, the world was enveloped by the night once again. The originally bright night sky darkened quite a bit, as if some important essence was removed, and the former serene days were restored. The old man's eyes were abnormally bright, and his excited body was even trembling. He pointed towards the location in which the lightning had landed. Within the borders of the Azure province. Bring all the infants that were born tonight back to the imperial city. Yes, sir. The thunder-like response resonated past the horizon, and tens of thousands imperial city experts headed towards the Azure province. They swore to look for the divine body and give it to the imperial court for use. Time passed. 5 years elapsed with a blink, and although people still remembered the frightening scene that year, no one knew the actions of the imperial court within the borders of the Azure province of the 9 provinces. Amongst the countless of schools, the Azure Dragon School was one of them. Today, once again, it was the annual recruitment of disciples for the Azure Dragon School. There were oceans of people outside of the school. Every time, the busiest people were the outer court disciples. All the responsibilities of the admittance for the school were all pushed onto their heads. Outer court disciples. They were the ones that did the hard and thankless tasks. Not only were their position lowest in the school, they were even looked down upon by outsiders. The reason was very simple. If they were an outer court disciple, it meant that their aptitude was horrible, and in their entire life, it would be very hard for them to have any big achievements. So naturally, they were despised upon. Oi, what's with this attitude? Do you know who I am? A lady who wore gorgeous clothes had a boy with her as she pointed and loudly yelled at a young man. I am very sorry. It is already late now, and the school will close soon. Please come back tomorrow. The young man's delicate face was still young and tender, but between his eyebrows, he had a bit of heroic spirit. He was called Chu Feng. He was 15 this year, and he was one of the tens of thousands of outer court disciples in the Azure Dragon School. Although he was an outer court disciple, Chu Feng was different from all the others. He did not feel inferior to others, and he did not degrade himself. He did not feel afraid or scared while treating others, and he was very calm. Come back tomorrow. You think I'm an idiot? These are the mountains. Where are you even going to let us sleep? You must arrange a place of residence for me, or else I'll go find your elders for reasoning. The lady did not listen and did not care. She even grabbed onto Chu Feng's clothes. Chu Feng, have you met with trouble? But just at that time, A sweet voice could be heard. Looking at that direction. A young female who wore purple was walking over. Although there was a faint smile on her mouth. Her eyes were fierce and they tightly stared at the lady. As she saw the young female, the color of the lady's face instantly changed and a strong expression of fear gushed out. It was not because of anything else. It was just because the young female was wearing the purple robe. And that was a mark of the inner disciples. The lady hiddenly cursed. She originally thought she could use her status to make things difficult for the young man in front of her. Who would have thought that the unremarkable young man in front of her had the support of an inner disciple? The inner disciples were an existence that she couldn't offend. It's nothing, it's nothing. I was just inquiring some things from him. The lady explained while smiling. The young female glared at her and only said one word. Scram. At that instant, the lady's body couldn't help but tremble and her face was already ashen. But she did not hesitate at all. She pulled the boy and quickly left. And under the panic she even tripped. Which made her look very rough. Seeing that, Chu Feng helplessly shook his head and said politely to the young female next to him. Thank you very much, Chu Yu. No need to be so polite. We're family, right? Chu Yu was a bit displeased. She was correct. They were indeed family. They came from the same family. Chu Yu was Chu Feng's cousin. From Chu Feng's father's brother line, and she was only 1 year older than Chu Feng. However, Chu Yu already passed the inner disciple exam 3 years ago and became an inner disciple. She was now in the 4th level of the spirit realm. We need to follow the school rules, Chu Feng said with a brilliant smile. What he meant by following the school rules was being respectful to elders. As inner court disciples, outer court disciples. Looking at Chu Feng behaving like that, Chu Yu's heart ached. Chu Feng, are you still not going to participate in this year's inner disciple exam? Or is it that you still haven't reached the 3rd level of the spirit realm? Chu Feng did not respond and a faint smile still hung on his face. No one knew what he meant. Seeing that, Chu Yu took off a bag from her waist and put it in Chu Feng's hands. Refine it. Perhaps it'll help you break through the 3rd level. Chu Feng opened the bag and instantly, strong spiritual energy was emitted from it. A bright, sparkling, transparent saint spirit grass that was the size of a finger laid within. Chu Yu. This is too precious. I can't take it. Chu Feng hurriedly returned it back to Chu Yu. Saint spirit grass. It was like a panacea for martial training and it was extremely precious. It had endless usefulness for those within the spirit realm. To increase their training speed, the Chu family would supplement 1 saint spirit grass to the Chu family members every year. Chu Yu was also supplemented by the family. But she didn't use it and gave it to Chu Feng. It really moved Chu Feng. So he really couldn't accept it. When I say I give it to you, you should take it. You are my little brother after all. Chu Yu was slightly irritated. Oh. When were you so generous and even started to give saint spirit grasses to people? Look, I am your little brother as well. And coincidentally, I will almost have a breakthrough into 4th level of the spirit realm. How about you give the saint spirit grass to me? A young man around the age of Chu Feng walked over and he was also wearing clothes of the inner court disciples. He was called Chuzhen and he was also from the Chu family. 5 years ago, he entered the Azure Dragon School at the same time as Chu Feng. However, he became an inner disciple 2 years ago. Chuzhen. You've already broke past the third level of the spirit realm and successfully condensed spiritual energy. Even if you don't have this Saint Spirit Grass, you can rank up quickly. But Chu Feng has not condensed spiritual energy yet. So this Saint Spirit Grass is more important to him. Chu Yu forcibly put the Saint Spirit Grass into Chu Feng's hands. Yep, you are correct. But sadly he doesn't want it. Chuzhen spread his hands open and sneered. Who said that I didn't want it? But then. Chu Feng lightly smiled and unrestrainedly put the Saint Spirit Grass in his pocket before saying, Chu Yu, I will borrow this Saint Spirit Grass. On a later date I will return them back twofold. Okay. Seeing that Chu Feng accepted it, Chu Yu was already happy. So she just randomly responded and didn't care whether Chu Feng would return it back or not. If you're taking it, then why return it? Giving you this Saint Spirit Grass for you to use is such a waste. Chuzhen's face had a really ugly look on it. Chu Feng just smiled and ignored him. He then said to Chu Yu, Chu Yu, I will participate in this year's Inner Disciple exam. You? If you can pass the Inner Disciple exam, I'll give this year's supplemented Saint Spirit Grass to you. Chuzhen looked at Chu Feng with contempt. Is that true? Chu Feng didn't really believe it. Chu Yu will be the witness. But what if you can't pass it? Then the Saint Spirit Grass I get this year will belong to you. Leaving that sentence behind, Chu Feng continued to throw himself into the work of outer court disciples. Chuzhen, we are family. Why do you always need to make things so hard for Chu Feng? Chu Yu looked at Chuzhen with annoyance. Family? Chu Yu, you should know that Chu Feng isn't part of our Chu family. After entering the school for 5 years, he still hasn't passed the Inner Disciple exam. He is absolutely the disgrace of our Chu family. In the entire Chu family, which one likes him? Only you treat him nicely, and you even give your own Saint Spirit Grass to him for use. Chuzhen really did not understand. You are truly stupid. Chu Yu was a bit angry, and after glaring at him for a moment, she walked away. On the other hand, Chuzhen smiled. He really was happy. Although he didn't get Chu Yu's Saint Spirit Grass, he knew that this year, Chu Feng's Saint Spirit Grass would certainly be his. A bit into the night, in the resting area for the outer court disciples, it was complete darkness. After being busy for the entire day, everyone was very tired and they slept very early. Only Chu Feng's room was still lit up by light. He sat on the front of the bed, took out the Saint Spirit Grass that Chu Yu gave him and muttered, I hope this Saint Spirit Grass can make you full. After saying that, Chu Feng closed both his eyes, clamped the Saint Spirit Grass between both his palms and did a strange hand seal. At that instant, the spiritual energy inside the Saint Spirit Grass started to enter Chu Feng's body through his palm and it converged into his dantian. Tian dantian. At the same time, chewing sounds came from Chu Feng's dantian as if something was having a meal. If you looked through his skin, you would discover in the deep part of Chu Feng's dantian, a lump of lightning was occupying there. That lump of lightning had 9 colors and every color was like a huge lightning beast. It emitted a terrifying aura that did not belong to this world. Martial God Asura. Chapter 2 Beauty Elder. Chu Feng wasn't really from the Chu family. He was an adopted son by Chu Yuan, the fifth oldest in the Chu family. That caused Chu Feng to be pushed aside and to be humiliated at a small age. If it wasn't for Chu Yuan's protection, he would have already been kicked out of the Chu family. Because of that, Chu Feng was very thankful towards Chu Yuan and swore to become the pride of Chu Yuan and to win back some honor. 5 years ago, Chu Feng was exactly 10 years old, and it was the best age to train in the martial arts. Him at that time had many expectations for training, because he felt that the time to prove himself had arrived. However, he never would have thought after entering the Azure Dragon School for 1 month, lightning would strike his body and enter his dantian. At first, Chu Feng even thought it was good luck, because when he started training, his speed of improvement was astonishing. In 2 short months, he arrived at the 2nd level of the spirit realm. That speed was completely abnormal. And because of that, Chu Feng didn't dare to tell it to anyone, so he hid his strength and continued training. But the good scene did not last long. Just as Chu Feng thought he became a genius, change happened within his body. Because of that change, it made it so his cultivation stopped and did not move forward. And he was labeled to have the most horrible talent of a lifetime. BZZ. At that time, the Saint Spirit grass in Chu Feng's hands was being refined and absorbed by his dantian. His refining speed was extremely fast and it exceeded common sense. Normally, with Chu Feng's strength, it would take at least 1 month to refine the Saint Spirit grass. However, looking at it now, it was already halfway refined just after a short while. And Chu Feng's dantian that felt like a never-ending cave also had a feeling of being full. BZZ. Suddenly, light floated over Chu Feng's hand and the other half of the Saint Spirit grass instantly disappeared. Also, at the same time, everything changed in Chu Feng's dantian. The 9 lightning beasts interwove with each other. It was hurriedly moving. And it was actually condensing. Finally, it turned into a pill-like object. After the pill formed itself, endless spiritual energy surged out from it like a tide washing Chu Feng's body. Very soonly, it permeated through his entire body. Whoosh! Chu Feng suddenly opened his eyes, and there were traces of lightning in them. An indescribable expression hung on his face. I succeeded. After 5 years, I finally succeeded. Chu Feng was incomparably joyful. He jumped down from the bed, and as he walked around, he sized up his body. In the journey of martial cultivation, the known realms were the following: Spirit, Origin, Profound, and Heaven. Those were the 4 big realms. And every realm was divided into 9 levels. The first level of the spirit realm, the main point of it was to train the physical body with special methods and to increase strength. But after reaching the 2nd level of the spirit realm, one must use ways to condense spiritual energy. Only people who successfully condensed their spiritual energy in their dantian could truly start their path in martial cultivation. Chu Feng's body changed and it made it unable to condense spiritual energy. The divine lightning in his dantian were like 9 hungry wild beasts. The spiritual energy that Chu Feng condensed would always be engulfed by that divine lightning. But he didn't give up. It was because he found out that although the divine lightning did engulf his spiritual energy, there was a limit. As long as he kept on providing spiritual energy towards his dantian, he could fill it up one day. And today, He finally succeeded. This is a really strong feeling. Endless amounts of spiritual energy is surging into my body, as though it was going to break through my body. This feeling was inconceivable to Chu Feng. He never would have thought that the divine lightning would directly condense into a pill and occupy a place in the dantian. The spiritual energy that the divine lightning was giving off was very dense, and it was beyond imagination. He knew that even with his 5 years of non-stop cultivation, he could not condense such strong spiritual energy. The reason why he could was because of that divine lightning. Bzz, but just at that time, Chu Feng's body suddenly became stiff, and his expression also changed greatly. The divine lightning was changing. His power instantly increased by several times, and he suddenly broke through again and stepped into the 4th level of the spirit realm. Have the hard times stopped and the good times come? Chu Feng tightly clenched his fist, and he felt that the explosive power in his body was worth his 5 years of suffering. Suddenly continuously breaking through 2 levels. The unexplainable method of becoming strong finally returned. He used a severe gaze to look towards the direction of the inner court and muttered, "Chu Zhen, I'll be taking your Saint Spirit grass." The Azure Dragon School's disciple recruitment only happened once a year, and every time it lasted for 10 days. After 10 days, the annual inner disciple exam would start. This time, Chu Feng, who had been silent for 5 years, would also participate. The exam location was a huge underground palace. Within the main hall of the underground palace, the number of people were like oceans and mountains, and there were most likely over 10,000 people. Most of the people there were at the 3rd level of the spirit realm, because everyone knew that the inner disciple exam required one to be at least in the 3rd level to pass. However, there was also a small portion of disciples at the 2nd level, and they wanted to try to pass it within the confusion. There were people like that every year, but most of them ended with failures. The thing worth mentioning, though, was that there were also a small portion of 4th levels there. They were not mediocre people who trained slow. And in fact, some of them were even geniuses. They intentionally waited until they were at the 4th level of the spirit realm before participating in the inner disciple exam. The reason? For the reward. When one reached the 3rd level, they could start training martial skills. Martial skills were very strong attacking methods. Not only could they thoroughly display strength, they could also make people gain power that exceeded the limits of their body. Because of that, martial skills were very precious. And even the rich and powerful families that has been existing for generations didn't have them. That was the reason why all sorts of families had to send their young generations into various schools for cultivation. In every school, there were a large amount of martial skills. And within the Azure Dragon School, as long as you become an inner court disciple, you could start cultivating the martial skills. Martial skills were also divided into ranks, and from the weakest to the strongest. There were 9 ranks. Within the inner court, the best martial skill book was only a rank 3 one. But, within the annual inner disciple exam, the first person to pass it would get a rank 4 martial skill book. That was why those people would rather train in the outer court and not enter the inner court. It was for the rank 4 martial skill book. Look, isn't that Yang Tianyu? Wah, it really is him. He's already at the 4th level of the spirit rank by the age of 13. It seems like first place in this exam will be him. In the ocean of people, one young man grabbed people's attention. To be more precise, it was a boy. There were dozens of thousands of disciples in the outer court, and most of them were unknown characters. However, the focal figures that people paid attention to were mostly geniuses, in which this Yang Tianyu was one of them. That may not be so. No matter how much aptitude Yang Tianyu has, he is, at the end, a child. It would be very hard for him to get first. There are many unknown talents in Azure Dragon School, and sometimes geniuses may not be able to beat the mediocre. For example, that Duan Yuxuan. Another outer court disciple pointed with his fingers at a cold young man. That person was called Duan Yuxuan. He has been in the Azure Dragon School for 6 years, and he was also originally an unknown character. But a few months ago, he unexpectedly defeated an inner disciple who was in the 4th level of the spirit realm. Because of that, his name was widespread and he became the focal character of the outer court. Silence suddenly. A loud and clear sound echoed. Looking at the source, everyone couldn't help but stare blankly. They saw a dozen or so silhouettes appear on the high platform in the hall. Most of them were aged, old people, and they were the outer court elders. But not only was the leader young, she was even a beautiful female. The female was wearing a red, skin-tight dress, and it outlined her alluring curves, especially under the dress. There were 2 straight, snow-white legs, and it could be said that they were perfect. Not only was her body attractive, her appearance was also extremely lovely. With round eyes, red lips, and an oval face. It was just like a fox face. She was the famous beauty elder of Azure Dragon School, Su Ro. Su Ro was a top-class character. She entered the Azure Dragon School at the age of 10, entered the inner court at the age of 12, and became a core disciple at the age of 15. But just as everyone were optimistic and thought that she would become Azure Dragon School's one disciple, she suddenly became an elder. No one had the inside information about this change. And up to today, it was still a mystery, and it was discussed enthusiastically by people. Wow, it's Su Ro. Wasn't she supposed to be an elder in the inner court? Why did she come to the outer court? With the appearance of Su Ro, all of the male disciples opened their mouths and some even drooled. The outer court disciples were very young. Most of them were teenagers and some were even children. To them at their age, a mature female like Su Ro had the most charm. Su Ro didn't have the air of the elders as she charmingly smiled towards the crowd and said gently, "The exam rules are very simple. Enter the gate behind me and come out from the other gate. With that, you pass the exam. The only difference is that the first person to pass will get a rank 4 skill book. You can't even get this in the inner courts. But something worth mentioning is that the person who is first this year will get another special reward, depending on one's perspective. This reward could be even more precious than the previous one." After saying that, Su Ro intentionally lengthened the intonation. The enchanting air filled the entire hall. Martial God Asura. Chapter 3: The start of the examination. What would it be? Someone asked curiously. Elder Su Ro is giving her body? Some were even shameless and had lewd thoughts. Although Su Ro was an elder, she was only 20 years old. Compared to the old antiques, she was a lot more easygoing. Because of that, a lot of people didn't worry at all when they talked like that. Su-ro only smiled charmingly in response to the guesses of the crowd. She raised 5 slim fingers. Then said, 5 Saint Spirit grasses. What? 5 Saint Spirit grasses? I didn't hear wrong, did I? The reward are Saint Spirit grasses. And 5? With those words, the main hall went into chaos and everyone could not remain calm. Saint Spirit grasses were extremely precious and even the Chu family could only give each person 1 per year. To ordinary people, Saint Spirit grasses were priceless treasures and some had not even seen it before. Seeing that the Azure Dragon School could take out 5 of them, it was a huge temptation to the outer court disciples. But for most of the people, they could only dream about it because they knew that they had no chance in getting those Saint Spirit grasses. However, to the disciples who were aiming to be the first, they were all eager to give it a try and they got even more excited. Su-ro nodded with satisfaction as she saw the high spirits of the disciples. Then, she waved her hand. Behind her, rumbling noises came. The gate that was dozens of feet tall slowly opened. What are you waiting for? Don't want to pass the exam? Su-ro smiled beautifully as she looked at the disciples who were staring blankly. Go. At that moment, endless cheers resonated and the tens of thousands outer court disciples were like wild horses who got rid of its reins as they all rushed towards the huge gate. Chu Feng went along with the flow of people and continued forward. Finally, they entered a deep cave. The cave was very vast, but it was very dark in there. The field of vision was extremely low and people knew the danger of traps that could be triggered at any moment. Go. For the rank 4 skill. For the 5 Saint Spirit grasses. Go. But of course, there were some people that cared about money and didn't care about their life. They knew that there was danger, but they still went ahead by themselves and didn't even look back. There was even quite a few of people who were like that. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. But after going ahead for 100 meters, whooshing sounds came in front and endless amounts of silver needles were shot out from the wall. And they shot towards the crowds as if it was rain. Ah. Wah. In an instant, all sorts of cries echoed. The disciples that rushed in front were caught off guard and over half of them fell. Regardless, people still continued forward and they did not have any traces of retreating. They madly ran deeper into the cave. Although the silver needle was strong, it wouldn't kill. And they knew that. After all, it was only a mechanism and to the people at the 3rd level of the spirit realm, they could dodge it as long as they were careful. As they continued to go in deeper, the silver needles also got denser and denser and the people that they hit were usually caught off guard. In situations like those, the crowds quickly distanced themselves. The people who were running at the front were no longer people who came hoping they would pass in the confusion. They were strong people such as Yang Tianyu and Duan Yuxuan. It had to be mentioned that those people were indeed not ordinary. As they walked in the storm like needles, they needed to be extremely careful. But it was as though they were leveling the ground with their shoes and it didn't look like they were running through mechanisms at all. They were simply people in a running race. Chu Feng was always behind them in the spirit realm army that consisted of people at the 3rd level. He did that for 2 reasons. Firstly, he didn't want to stand out. Secondly, his situation was very special and he didn't want to show his true strength too early. That was why he was waiting for a chance where he could surpass everyone when no one was looking. Duan Yuxuan. You're already so old yet you can't even win a child like me in a race. Don't you think it's a bit embarrassing? Humph, little brat. In the journey of martial cultivation, age doesn't matter. Only strength does. If you want to boast, then do that after you win. Let us travel through time a bit. There were only two shadows left in the very front. They were Duan Yuxuan and Yang Tianyu. Both of them were at the fourth level of the spirit realm. One of them had outstanding talent. The other had plenty of experience. The two of them were fairly even, and the tension between them got stronger and stronger. It was because they knew that their largest competition was each other. As long as they win over their opponent, the prize for being first would belong to them. Hugh, suddenly, a breeze of wind came from the front. The two of them were surprised as they looked closely, and they couldn't help but slow down their paces. It was because dense fog appeared in front of them. The cave was already dark. And with the fog it meant that their vision would be even poorer. With that, it also greatly increased the difficulty of dodging the mechanisms. Even if it was them, they needed to treat it carefully. Good chance. Just as everyone was slowing down, Chu Feng secretly rejoiced. He went forward in huge strides. And with a whoosh, his entire body was like an arrow leaving a bow as he flew forward. Whoosh. At that time, Duan Yuxuan was concentrating on dodging the silver needles. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed past him, without giving any time for him to react. That person disappeared once again. Did I imagine it? With that, it made Duan Yuxuan feel quite a bit of shock. He thought it was Yang Tianyu at the start, but he noticed that Yang Tianyu was not far behind him. Then, he was distracted with his thoughts. The person who successfully left everyone behind, Chu Feng, didn't care about them that much as he increased his speed to the maximum. After that long running, he didn't feel any fatigue. The spiritual energy within his body was endless to take, and it continuously surged from his dantian. Not only that, his speed and strength, hearing and vision power all surpassed the people who were at the same level than him. At least it greatly surpassed Duan Yuxuan and Yang Tianyu. Chu Feng wasn't too surprised at that chance because it was something special about him. He already seen this specialness 5 years ago. From now on, his specialness returned, and it gave him incomparable self-confidence because there was no one who could call themselves a genius in front of him anymore. As he ran with flying speed, Chu Feng finally left the mechanism stage, exited the dark cave, and arrived in the middle of a wide hall. At the end of the hall, there was a tall platform made out of stone. On top of the stone, there were several items. It was the rank 4 martial skill book and the 5 spirit saint grasses. Seeing those things, Chu Feng was a bit emotional. However, he didn't not rush ahead. Rather, he looked at the stone doors on the side of the hall. So behind those are the legendary fierce beasts? Chu Feng's mouth curved up in expectation. He knew that this exam just only started. The creatures that he was going to face were terrifying. Bloodthirsty, ruthless creatures, called fierce beasts. Elder Su Ro, look. This is too astonishing. I've been guarding here for so many years. But this really is the first time that I've seen a disciple that passed through with such a speed. Within a mysterious stone room in the underground palace, an old elder was staring at a disordered stone, and astonishment filled his gaze. That was not a normal stone. It was a mechanism within the underground palace. The stone only disordered itself after a mechanism got triggered. Looking at it, The entire stone was disordered. Which only meant one thing. Someone already passed the mechanism stage. The fastest person to clear the mechanism stage took 2 hours from the past examinations. But currently, only 1 hour had passed. This change grabbed everyone's attention. The dozen or so elders in the stone room all gathered around, and they were all very startled. It seems that there's an interesting character within the outer court disciples this year. Su-Ro also gathered over. And as she looked at the disordered stone, she nodded with satisfaction. Since it's like this, we can't let him pass so easily. Let me make it more interesting. After saying that, she looked above the stone. There were 3 round stones embedded in the wall. Suddenly, she smiled strangely and hit the 3 stones with 3 bangs. Don't touch it. Seeing that, all of the elders there were alarmed. But it was too late. At that time all 3 stones were already pressed by Su-Ro. What? Didn't you tell me that these stones would release the fierce beasts? Looking at the elders in panic, Su-Ro also felt that something was wrong. Those 3 stones do indeed release the fierce beasts. But they cannot be pressed at the same time. If they are pressed at the same time, they will release all the imprisoned fierce beasts at the same time. That would be 30 rank 2s, 9 rank 3s, and 1 rank 4. After saying that, Elder Li's face was already pale and his voice was trembling a bit. The elders that guarded there understood the fierce beasts very clearly. They were ruthless and terrifying creatures. And they were many times stronger than the people who were at the same level. Seeing so many fierce beasts being released at the same time, a round of slaughter could not be avoided. To think of the tens of thousands of disciples in the underground palace being slaughtered by the fierce beasts was not a pleasant thought. Why did you not remind me earlier? At that time, Su-Ro's face also changed greatly. Her body rose and became the wind. When the stone doors opened, she already disappeared. Elderly. What should we do? Everyone's gazes landed on this aged elder. What else can we do? Hurry and go help. Elderly bellowed angrily and rushed out. Martial God Asura. Chapter 4. Even fiercer than the fierce beasts. Chu Feng had heard of the infamous fierce beasts. They were a type of creature that could cultivate. They were divided into 9 ranks according to their strength. And they corresponded to the 9 levels of the martial cultivators in the spirit realm. However, from rumors, the strength of a rank 3 fierce beast was far stronger than a martial cultivator who was in the 3rd level of the spirit realm. And rank 3 fierce beasts could even be compared to cultivators at the 4th level of the spirit realm. That was why even if it was Chu Feng, he didn't dare to be arrogant. He knew that there was a mechanism in the main hall. And when it was triggered, the fierce beasts would appear. Bang! Suddenly, a heavy noise resounded and the stone doors that locked the fierce beasts started to open. Strange, I didn't even enter the main hall. Why did the stone doors open? Chu Feng was astonished. Bang, 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 bang. But quickly after, the 40 stone doors at the side of the main hall all opened. That completely stunned Chu Feng. It was because in the darkness behind those stone doors, pairs after pairs of blood-red eyes opened and a heavy bloodlust filled the entire main hall. Damn, this isn't a joke, is it? Chu Feng cursed. He clearly heard that in the last round of every exam, there would be one fierce beast. But what was this situation? Hua Chufeng didn't have much time to think about it too much because in front of his eyes, densely packed shadows leaped out from the stone doors and entered the main hall. He could clearly see that the shape of those creatures were similar to tigers but double their sizes. Their entire body was jet black and you could see their blade-like claws and ivory, as well as their pairs of blood-red eyes. There were a total of 40 fierce beasts. And since their appearances were not too different, they should be of the same kind. But upon closer inspection, Chufeng found out that there were strange lines on their forehead. Clearly, it was the mark of their rank. Just at that time, one of the fierce beasts growled and cast its gaze towards the high platform in the deeper parts of the main hall. Simultaneously, the gazes of all the fierce beasts were cast towards the high platform and they started to drool. Damn, you robbers! Seeing that, Chufeng was angered. How could he let these fierce beasts take the precious treasures? With a curse, he rushed towards the platform. Just as Chufeng entered the main hall, it quickly attracted the attention of the fierce beasts. That was quite good for him. A total of 40 fierce beasts all concurrently gave up on the Saint Spirit grasses. And they all surrounded Chufeng and attacked him. It was as if to them, the blood and flesh of humans was more attractive than some spiritual medicine. Move 1 rank 2 fierce beast attacked head-on. But with a punch from Chufeng, he blew off its head. It was unable to even survive a single strike. However, also at the same time, quite a few fierce beasts surrounded him and attacked. The terrifying killing intent was enough to make one's entire body tremble. But Chufeng did not panic. He was as vigorous as a monkey, jumping left and right as he went back and forth within the crowd of fierce beasts. Every time he attacked, there was at least one fierce beast that died. At that time and moment, compared to the cruel fierce beasts, Chufeng was an even scarier monster. Every part of his body was like an indestructible sharp weapon. Despite the rough skin and thick flesh of the fierce beasts, they could not withstand a strike from Chufeng. At that moment, Chufeng could feel that not only was the endless spiritual energy surging in his body, there was also the 9-colored divine lightning that he loved and hated. It was this divine lightning who gave him such strong power and forged a perfect body for him. Just as Chufeng was killing furiously, a sharp growl came from behind. When he turned around to look, he couldn't help but be surprised. The sharp claws of a huge fierce beast was heading towards his head. That huge claw was different from the others as it was quite a bit stronger than the other fierce beasts. If he got caught in it, his brain would certainly shatter. Whoosh! Chufeng reflexively jumped back as he attempted to dodge the huge claw. But the claw's speed was really too fast. Although Chufeng's brain dodged the damage, the claws still landed on Chufeng's chest. 5 bloody wounds were torn into his chest and the fatal pain made Chufeng cry out loud. I will tear you apart. Other than feeling the pain, Chufeng was even more angry. He already saw that there were 4 lines on the forehead of the fierce beast that attacked him, indicating that it was a rank 4 fierce beast. If he was some other person, then without a doubt, that person would turn around and run. Who cared if they were in the same level of cultivation? The power of the fierce beast would undoubtedly be stronger than the humans. But not only did Chufeng not escape, he even crazily pounced towards that fierce beast. The movement, which had no care of his life, made even the unintelligent fierce beast hesitate subconsciously. Clang! As the fierce beast hesitated, Chu Feng solidly landed a punch on its forehead. But there wasn't the explosion of blood as expected. Rather, there was a loud sound, as if steel and iron collided. Even Chu Feng felt a wave of itchiness from his fist. And it was as though the punch didn't land on the head of the fierce beast, but rather landed on a copper and iron wall. Wah! Chu Feng's punch was no small matter. The fierce beast wailed and it even backed off a few steps. It was obvious that it also felt the pain. Die for me. Seeing that his attacks had some effect, Chu Feng didn't hold back anymore. Swinging his arms, the after images of the punches filled the air, flew in all directions, and his heavy fists were like a storm. They continuously punched the body of the fierce beast. It had to be mentioned that Chu Feng's exploding strength was too strong. Under the insane attacks, the fierce beast that was a few times larger than him was pushed back. The other fierce beasts that wanted to launch a surprise attack on him also undoubtedly received a punch, and got killed just like that. At the end, all 40 fierce beasts were completely killed by Chu Feng. Large amounts of bodies and heads were in strange areas, and their death were extremely wretched. The body of the rank 4 fierce beast was still intact. However, its huge brain was deflated by Chu Feng as it was alive. Who the current Chu Feng was standing in a pool of blood and he was deeply gasping for air. After that bloodbath, more frightening wounds appeared on his body, but they weren't enough to kill him. Other than the attack of the rank 4 fierce beast, the wounds caused from all the others were only simple bruises and they didn't even scratch him. How strong is this fearful body? It was a question that Chu Feng asked himself. Compared to those fierce beasts, he felt that he had steel for tendons and iron for bones. That body exceeded the limits of humans. And once again, he recognized his specialness. After looking around with his eyes, Chu Feng leaped on the tall platform. Without even looking at them, he took the martial skill book and the Saint Spirit grasses. After doing that, Chu Feng didn't plan to open the huge closed door. He went back towards the direction in which he came from and re-entered the mechanism stage. Before Chu Feng left for long, within the stone room that closed the fierce beasts, a dozen or so shadows walked out. The one who led person was Su Ro. At that moment, whether it be Su Ro or the aged elders, their expression were very strange. They only saw Chu Feng continuously hitting the already dead rank 4 fierce beast. But to think that so many strong fierce beasts were only killed by one youth, it was unimaginable. Elderly. Who is that child? Su Ro inquired. Elderly did not respond. He looked at the other elders behind him, but all the elders shook their head. You don't know what the name of such an outstanding disciple is? Su Ro's brows wrinkled, showing some displeasement. There are simply too many outer court disciples. If he was hiding his strength, then we. Elder Li's face was full of helplessness. Whatever, hurry up and find out about his background, then tell me. Also, if he doesn't want to expose his strength, then leave it as he wishes and don't let him know that we are trying to understand his power. Su Ro instructed. As you wish. Elderly and the others respond respectfully. While facing this inner court elder, they didn't dare to be unrespectful. Su Ro looked deeply and meaningfully at the direction in which Chu Feng left in. And only then did she enter the stone room while contemplating. Martial God Asura. Chapter 5 Azure Dragon Founder. After Su Ro and the other left, the main hall sunk into silence. A moment later, rapid stepping sounds could be heard from outside of the hall, and one disciple quickly ran over. That person was Duan Yuxuan. But compared to the him before, it was like they were two completely different people. Messy hair, full of sweat, panting heavily, and running towards the high platform as if he was crazy. Haha. At the end, I am the first. You little child Yang Tianyu. You want to fight me? I secretly endured in the outer court for 6 years. What was it for? I'll tell you right now. It's for these. Duan Yuxuan ran and cheered, as though he was possessed by a demon. His eyes were tightly glued to the tall platform, and he didn't even notice the corpses of the fierce beasts in the hall. Whoosh, he leaped and stably landed on the tall platform. But just as he was full of smiles, after looking down, it was like a lightning in a clear sky. And he was instantly shocked. It was because on that tall platform, it was completely empty. There wasn't even a single strand of hair. Damn, what's this? After a long while, he refocused. Only then did he notice that fresh blood was everywhere, and the corpse of 40 fierce beasts were scattered in the hall. The death of every fierce beast was very soul-shaking and extremely bloody. That scene completely frightened him. With a poof, he sat on the tall platform. He turned around and looked. But he discovered that the door to pass the exam wasn't opened. What is happening? Duan Yuxuan didn't know what to think, and his thoughts were all scrambled. Tadada, just at that time, Yang Tianyu also ran over. But just as he arrived at the entrance of the hall, he stopped. After looking at the scene in the hall, he looked at the Duan Yuxuan on the platform. He stared with a blank face. You did this? Duan Yuxuan lightly chuckled, then said bitterly, if I said no, would you believe me? Of course I would believe you. It would be impossible for you to have such strong strength. Yang Tianyu shot him a glance and entered the hall. He examined the corpses of the fierce beasts. God, there's even a rank 4 fierce beast here. Whose work is this? After observing for a good while, they couldn't find out the answer. They never would have knew that someone with so much power was within the outer court. At the end, they even suspected that it was a situation planned by the elders, and the elders took the reward for being first. But when the level 3 Spirit Realm Disciple Army arrived, the dramatic scene happened. Everyone thought that it was Yang Tianyu and Duan Yuxuan who killed the fierce beasts, and the two of them divided the reward between them. But then funny thing was, as they were facing the gazes of admiration from the crowd, Yang Tianyu and Duan Yuxuan did not deny it. Just like that, they magically became first. The huge door opened behind them, and the cheers also came. Everyone was very happy because when they walked out of that huge door, they would become inner court disciples and a new life would come. But just as people were cheering, a youth walked over and he attracted everyone's attention. He was completely naked and he was even crying. He cursed while filled with grievance. Who the hell is so cruel? Not only did they knock me out, they even took my clothes. What is this madness? As they looked at that scene, people were astonished. Only Chu Feng smiled, and he slowly left the crowd while looking at his perfect, undamaged clothes. The inner court exam had ended. There were over 10,000 people who participated. But there were only 2,000 people who passed the exam. However, that was no small amount. You only become a real Azure Dragon disciple after entering the inner court. At the same time, you would also receive a more preferable treatment to welcome the new disciples that entered the inner court. The elders even specially set up a banquet. The round moon hung high up in the night sky. There was plenty of singing and dancing in the inner court. And that raised the happy mood to the highest point. But Chu Feng did not join in the feast. He stayed within his new residence and he looked at his wound on his bare upper body. The wound was healing and the healing speed was extremely fast. If it continued at that speed, it only needed a few days for it to make a full recovery. The healing power was given by the divine lightning. What are you? Why did you choose me? It wasn't the first time that Chu Feng asked it that question. He asked countless number of times before. But he never got an answer. He still remembered the night 5 years ago. The sky of the Azure province was enveloped by the 9-colored lightning. The sky was as bright as the day and the lightning dancing was like a dragon. The thunder in the sky roared and the ground trembled. People even thought that the world was ending and everything was in disarray under the panic. But the Chu Feng, who was only 10 years old, couldn't help but run out the door and he headed towards a spacious land. Even until now, he did not know why he did that. It was as if there was some magic attracting him to go over to that place. After that, the divine lightning attached onto his body. No one saw it. But he knew the 9-colored lightning that shook the entire world was inside his dantian. That divine lightning gave Chu Feng such a strong body. However, Chu Feng did not understand why such a powerful thing was attached onto his body. Whatever, if you don't answer. I won't ask. You and me are one after all. Chu Feng smiled with relief. It was luck and not misfortune. And if it was misfortune, then he couldn't avoid it. If this divine lightning really wanted to do anything bad to him, then with his current power, he had no chance of resisting. But up until now, the divine lightning had only brought benefits, so he didn't bother thinking about it anymore. Chu Feng put his clothes back on and cast his gaze at the book on the head of the bed. On the book, there were 3 big words. 3 thunder styles. Chu Feng picked up the book and started to flip through it. It was the first time that he got in touch with a martial skill book, so he was a bit excited in his heart. Rank 4 skill. 3 thunder styles. Created by the Azure Dragon founder. After mastering lightning speed, thunderous power, as strong as a rank 5 skill. After looking at the short description, Chu Feng took in a breath of cold air and said surprisingly, "This is a skill that was created by the ancestor who founded this school." The Azure Dragon founder was the founder of the Azure Dragon School. 1,000 years ago. He was unrivaled as he traveled around the world. He had powers to fly in the sky, escape in the ground, move mountains, and fill oceans. He was a real expert in martial cultivation. In that era, the Azure Dragon School that was led by the Azure Dragon founder could be said to be the one school in all of the 9 provinces. The only one who could resist against the Azure Dragon School was the current overlord of the 9 provinces, the Imperial Court. But the good scene did not last for long. After the Azure Dragon founder passed away, the Azure Dragon School started to decline and it quickly fell from the ranks of the top schools of the 9 provinces. Today, even within the borders of the Azure province. They were only a second-class school. However, that really emphasized the personal strength of the Azure Dragon founder. The skill he created would certainly be quite a fine product within skill books. You could not get it with begging, but rather by chance instead. As he was being excited, Chu Feng quickly read the training methods and swore to succeed in practicing the 3 thunder styles. Chu Feng did not sleep at all, but at least he understood the ways to train the 3 thunder styles. First style was form. The second style was intention. The third style could create lightning. All in all, to train in the 3 thunder styles was extremely hard. But Chu Feng wanted to give it a try. After some washing his face and rinsing his mouth, Chu Feng didn't feel sleepy, so he headed towards the inner court's martial skill building. First of all, the martial skill building had the facilities for training martial skills. Also, because he couldn't expose that he was training in the 3 thunder styles, he needed to train in another martial skill to fool people. This is quite lively. He walked into the martial skill building, and suddenly, there was a huge opening. It was overcrowded in the vast main hall of the martial skill building. But that was reasonable. After all, there were 2,000 or so disciples that joined in the inner court yesterday. Those new disciples probably wanted to cultivate some martial skills. The martial skill building was divided into 6 floors. The first floor for choosing rank 1 skills. The second floor for choosing rank 2 skills. The third floor for choosing rank 3 skills. And for floor 4, 5, and 6, they were areas for cultivating the martial skills. Chu Feng kept on going up. He found out that the first floor was packed with people. The second floor was a lot better. And as for the third floor, there were very few people. That was all within expectations. Although it was said that the different ranks of the martial skills had different powers, the training difficulty was different as well. That was why a lot of people who entered the inner court would start training in the rank 1 skills. Then after they mastered it, they would choose the rank 2s. Then lastly the rank 3s. But Chu Feng's goal was very clear. Even if the martial skill was only for defense, Chu Feng had to choose the strongest. Young man, I recommend that you don't bite off more than you can chew. The skills in here are not suited for you. But just as Chu Feng stepped onto the 3rd floor, an aged voice entered his ears. Martial God Asura. Chapter 6. Don't tell me it's him? He looked over towards the source of the sound. At the entrance of the 3rd floor, an old man who had white hair, white brows, and a white beard was staring him. Chu Feng knew that he was an elder who guarded the martial skill building. Although he seemed to be almost 100 years old, the elder's strength was very strong. Thank you for your reminder. But I have my own plans. After respectfully saluting to the elder, he walked in. Tien by saluting. It meant the Chinese salute of cupping one hand over the other. Ah, another arrogant disciple. The elder who was guarding shook his head with disappointment. He had seen many disciples just like Chu Feng, and most of them ended in failure. The ones that failed lightly fixed their ways. But the ones that failed heavily completely walked on the wrong path and forfeited their good future. But even so, when the elder saw a new face coming in, he would kindly remind them to avoid any more disciples going on the wrong path. Chu Feng walked around on the 3rd level, and he quickly picked a skill book that he liked and brought it up to the elder to register it. Are you sure you want to train in this illusionary palm? The elder looked at Chu Feng with doubt. Chu Feng smiled and nodded. Did you look over the description of this skill? The elder continued to ask. I have seen it. Chu Feng smiled once again. Yet you still choose it? This is the hardest one in the entire martial skill building. The elder really did not understand. This is exactly the one that I want to train in. Chu Feng still hung his smile on his face. But his gaze was abnormally resolute. Sigh, the youth these days really don't know their limits. The elder sighed. But he still registered for Chu Feng. After giving back the skill book, he added, remember to know what point to stop. Chu Feng nodded, representing that he accepted the advice. Although the elder was always doubting Chu Feng had a very good impression of him and he felt that he was a responsible elder. But just as Chu Feng turned around, a familiar body rubbed his shoulder and passed. It was Duan Yuxuan and his face was extremely ugly. Chu Feng did not know him well, so he didn't think any more about it. But just as he prepared to leave, he heard whispers behind him. And then he also understood why Duan Yuxuan was depressed. Isn't that Duan Yuxuan? I thought he already had a rank 4 skill book. So why is he here choosing another skill book? Or is the rank 4 skill book on Yang Tianyu? You don't know? In the feast last night, the inner court elders reminded them that the rank 4 skill book cannot be shared and only one person could train in it. After they heard the elder say that, the both of them just looked blank. Then, they finally confessed to the crowd. It turned out that they weren't first in the exam and there was another person that killed the 40 fierce beasts. So something like that happened. But why did they admit in doing it at the start? Who knows? Maybe they wanted face. But this time they really lost all of it. True, but who was first? I don't recall that someone was so strong in the outer court. 40 fierce beasts. And there was even a rank 4 in one of them. It really is unimaginable on how tough that person would be. As he listened to that, Chu Feng smiled and shook his head while walking to the next floor. He really wanted to start training. The 4th floor was the same as the first. It was also overcrowded. The new disciples were currently choosing the skill books, so these were the older disciples. Chu Feng looked over. Although it was said to be a floor, it could be better said to be a martial arts training ground. There were at least 1,000 people training with mechanisms and their yelling extended in all directions. It was quite spectacular. Also, other than the thousands of mechanisms in the main hall, there were countless private rooms which were also for training. It was a pretty good design. The ones that liked to be lively could join in with the people in the main hall and they could help each other as they sparred. The ones who enjoyed the silence could choose a private room and train there by themselves. After the stone door closed, they would be isolated from all the disturbances. Chu Feng did not join them and he went straight to the 6th floor. It was similar to the 3rd floor, but it was a lot more quiet. There were also a lot more places for training. Chu Feng entered a private room. After closing the stone door, he bowed to the mechanism pillar because he knew that the pillar was going to be ruined by him. The mechanism pillar was made out of steel and wood, so it was extremely sturdy. If it was attacked, it would automatically dodge. The dodging speed changed according to the opponent's attacking speed. Unless one perfected in cultivating a martial skill, it was very hard to damage it. Thus it was the best equipment for training. Illusionary palm. Using the power of the wind from the palm to formlessly control the enemy. Chu Feng looked over the cultivating method for the illusionary palm. Then, he went in front of the mechanism pillar. Whoosh whoosh, he suddenly extended his hands, and he saw that his palm created two traces. They attacked towards 2 points on the mechanism pillar. Swoosh swoosh, but just as they were going to land, the pillar swayed left and right, dodging Chu Feng's attack with lightning speed. At that instant, Chu Feng couldn't help but be at a slight loss. But then he quickly smiled with relief. Interesting. From that day forth, other than eating and sleeping, Chu Feng would always be in the martial skill building, and he trained non-stop. The 3 Thunder Styles. Created by the founder of the Azure Dragon School. Although it was extremely mysterious, it was also extremely hard to cultivate in. As for the illusionary palm, there was a reason why the elder called it as the hardest skill to train in the entire martial skill building. However, after training for a while, Chu Feng slowly understood the nature of the 2 skills. The 3 Thunder Styles. It was extremely tough and fierce. It was as fast as lightning, and as strong as thunder. Every move and every style could take the life of the enemy. And it was very mighty. The illusionary palm. It was actually the complete opposite. Replacing the reality and attacking when they get caught off guard. Although it wasn't as valiant as the 3 Thunder Styles, it was still quite the skill, and they were different in their own ways. After a good 10 days of minimal meals and sleeping, Chu Feng finally grasped the 2 types of skills. Although it couldn't be said that he perfected the illusionary palm, there wasn't much difference to it. On the other hand, he only successfully trained in the first 2 style of the 3 Thunder Styles. But even so, when Chu Feng successfully used the second style, he was shocked by the strong power. On the 3rd floor in the martial skill building, the elder who guarded was still the same, and Chu Feng was returning the illusionary palm. What, did you reach a dead end? The elder looked at Chu Feng with a bit of mock in his eyes, and the corner of his mouth showed that he was a bit proud of himself. Chu Feng did not reply and just smiled. But in the elder's eyes, Chu Feng's smile meant that he silently confirmed it. Go to the 1st floor and start from the rank 1 skills. Taking back the skill book, the elder reminded with goodwill. Thank you, elder. Chu Feng saluted and took his leave. He knows when to back off, so he still understands a bit. Looking at the departing back of Chu Feng, the elder nodded. The martial skill building was not open for the entire day. When the sun set, the martial skill building would close. And at that time, all the elder guards would need to check the skill books and the mechanisms. What's this fuss about? That needs me to personally go and see? Elder Ouyang, you have to check this out. I haven't seen such a strong disciple in such a long time. On the staircase, a middle-aged man was leading a white-haired elder, and they were heading towards a private room on the 6th floor. Within the private room, the indestructible mechanism pillar was full of dents, and it was almost able to be scraped. As he saw at the mechanism pillar, the white-haired elder's face became extremely heavy, and he looked at it carefully. This is. But as he found out that there were shallow palm marks one after the other on the mechanism, he couldn't help but be astonished. With his experience, he could instantly tell that the pillar was damaged by the illusionary palm. But in the inner court, There were very few disciples that could train the illusionary palm to that degree. Also, those who were able to already left to experience the outside world, and pretty much none of them remained in the martial skill building to train. After some deep thinking, the eyes of the elder suddenly lit up and he said with shock, "Don't tell me it's him?" Martial God Asura. Chapter 7 Spiritual Medicine Hunt. It turned out that this Ouyang elder was the elder that registered for Chu Feng. However, he also had another identity: the director of the martial skill building. He felt that the one who damaged the mechanism pillar like this could have been Chu Feng. But then after some careful thinking he felt that it wasn't right. After all, Chu Feng had only trained the illusionary palm for 10 days. After only 10 days, it was impossible to be able to use it to such degree. Elder Ouyang, look at this. Just as he was thinking hard and unable to understand, a call came from the private room right next to his. But the pillar just now wasn't even the important part. Ouyang was astonished once again, because the mechanism pillar in the adjacent private room was completely destroyed. 3 thunder styles. The second style. No one from the outer court can train in this skill. This time, Ouyang's face became serious. 3 thunder styles. It was a skill that only the core disciples could train in. Now it appeared in the outer court, which more or less meant that there were core disciples that leaked this skill to the outer court. But after some more precise thinking, he felt that it was impossible. The rules of the Azure Dragon School were very strict. If someone privately leaked the skill book out, it could be found out very easily. The core disciples wouldn't be so foolish to do those kinds of things. It is possible that. Finally, Ouyang found a trace of possibility. He said to the elder behind him, "Request for Elder Su Ro." At the same time, Chu Feng was cultivating in his own room. After 2 hours of refining, he continuously refined 3 Saint Spirit grasses. If someone saw that scene, they would certainly be speechless. Even for masters, to refine 1 Saint Spirit grass required at least 1 day. But Chu Feng didn't even need 1 hour. Also, the Saint Spirit grass the Chu Feng refined would all be absorbed by the Dantian and nothing would be wasted. Even martial cultivating masters couldn't do that. It was said that if a normal person refined a Saint Spirit grass, it was already very good if they could absorb 50 of the spiritual energy. It seems like the price for getting your power is extremely huge. But even so, Chu Feng was a bit helpless. It was because after refining the 3 Saint Spirit grasses, he didn't even feel a single trace of having a breakthrough. He even felt that his Dantian was empty. If he was a normal person, and he if completely absorbed the spiritual energy from the 3 Saint Spirit grasses, he would have pretty much went from the 4th level of the spirit realm to the 5th level of the spirit realm. That indicated a problem. Although the divine lightning gave Chu Feng strength that exceeded normal people to rise in cultivation levels, Chu Feng also needed to pay the cost that exceeded normal people: spiritual energy. Although Chu Feng could condense it, but even with months of non-stop cultivation would not be as good as the spiritual energy contained in a single Saint Spirit grass. This showed the price that Chu Feng had to pay if he wanted to raise his cultivation level. It would also be a huge problem in his future. Ah, is this the so-called there are detriments to all advantages? Chu Feng really wanted to refine the 2 Saint Spirit grass as he looked at them on the head of his bed. But he didn't do that because he prepared to give them to Chu Yu. Chu Yu should be stepping into the 5th level of the spirit realm soon. These 2 saint spirit grasses should give her a hand. After some hesitation, Chu Feng put away the saint spirit grasses, blew the candle and slept. The morning on the next day, Chu Feng already woke up early. So he pocketed the saint spirit grasses and wanted to find Chu Yu. But sadly, the inner court was really too big, and the amount of inner court disciples was rumored to be even more than the amount of outer court disciples. There was at least 100,000 inner court disciples within the vast group of palaces that filled the eye as far as it could see. To try to find a person here was like fishing a needle from an ocean. Brothers say, do we join an alliance or not? This is the spiritual medicine hunt. And more power comes from more people. Once you enter an alliance, it's really hard to get away from it. In the future, if the alliance has troubles, we would get dragged into together. That is true. Whatever, let's register at the plaza first. 2 young males that seemed to be brothers passed Chu Feng. But their conversation made Chu Feng very happy. Seniors, you just said that the spiritual medicine hunt's registration is starting? Chu Feng went up and asked. That's right. Every year. The time of the hunt is always different, so this year's was earlier than last year's. You seem to be a new disciple this year? If you want to register, come with us. That senior was fairly friendly. Sorry to trouble you too. Chu Feng politely smiled, and he was quite joyful. The so-called spiritual medicine was medicine that contained spiritual energy. There were different types. And spiritual medicine was divided into low quality, medium quality, high quality, and top quality. The saint spirit grass that Chu Feng had was a high-quality spiritual medicine. The spiritual medicine hunt was a welfare for the inner court disciples by the Azure Dragon School. In a certain area on the Azure Dragon mountain range, there were large amounts of spiritual medicine. And that area was called the Spiritual Medicine Mountain. Spiritual Medicine Mountain. It was originally the forbidden lands of the Azure Dragon School. But every year, they would open it up and all inner court disciples could register and join. It was called the Spiritual Medicine Hunt because the spiritual medicine had spiritual natures. They could hide in the ground, run away with extreme speed, and they even had strong attacks, so it was quite difficult to pick them. The current Chu Feng needed spiritual medicines the most. And the more the merrier. Conveniently, the spiritual medicine hunt started. And it could be said to be an enormous good news. Junior, it seems that you haven't joined in an alliance yet. Are you preparing to hunt by yourself? One of the brother was looking up and down at Chu Feng. Is there anything wrong with that? Chu Feng didn't understand. I'll be honest. This hunt is not something that can be done by one person. So I suggest that you join in an alliance. The 2 brothers kindly gave him advice. The so-called alliance was an organization created by the inner court disciples. Because these organizations could pull the relationships closer between disciples. The Azure Dragon School did not oppose it. And instead, they encouraged it. I've just joined in the inner court, so I don't understand the things about alliances too well. I wonder which alliance in the inner court are strong. Chu Feng asked with curiosity. Haha, you've asked the right person. Us too have done a lot of investigation on many of the inner court alliances. According to our investigation, There are around 1,000 or so alliances, and the title of the strongest belongs to the World Alliance and the Sword Alliance. The World Alliance has the most amount of members, reaching at least 5,000 people. Over there. There are a few people that have World behind their back and they are members of the World Alliance. There are less members in the Sword Alliance. But there are still at least 1,000 people. The Sword Alliance is a bit special. If you want to join them, you must have trained in the martial skills that use the sword as power. The people over there who have a black iron sword behind their back are members of the Sword Alliance. They are called the strongest not only because they have a lot of people. The important part is that the founders of the two alliances are well known in our Azure Dragon School. Those two people became core disciples 10 years ago. The core disciples these days are very well-known people. And with them as support, very little people dare to act against the people from the World Alliance and the Sword Alliance. Brother, you're a bit wrong. Although the World Alliance and the Sword Alliance have strong power, I think that the strongest is the Wings Alliance. Just as the elder brother was describing vividly and colorfully, the younger brother had an opinion and interrupted. Although the Wings Alliance are strong, they have too little people. 2 fists cannot fight 4 hands. And if there really was a conflict, they could not be the opponent of the World Alliance and the Sword Alliance. The elder brother shook his head. That may not be so. Although the Wings Alliance have little people, they are like dragons within men and they have the ability to attack 100 with one. I feel that even if the World Alliance and the Sword Alliance joined hands, they might not be able to defeat the Wings Alliance. The younger brother retorted. What is this Wings Alliance? Seeing as the two of them did not rest in their debates, Chu Feng got more and more curious as he listened. Junior, listen to me. The Wings Alliance are the legends in our inner court. Seeing that, the younger brother held on to Chu Feng and started to narrate as his saliva splattered everywhere. Martial God Asura. Chapter 8 Coincidentally meeting Chu Yu. The Wings Alliance rarely recruit members. But when they do, the people they recruit are like the dragon within men. Although the Wings Alliance only has 32 people within the inner court, they are very well-known people. Also, their hearts are one. And they look at each other like an extension of their hands and feet. Whoever dares to make a move against the members of the Wings Alliance, no matter who it is, they will have their revenge. 2 years ago, a third-rate school in the Azure province harmed a member of the Wings Alliance. The one that exterminated the school was also the Wings Alliance. That strong? Listening to that point, Chu Feng was also astonished. Although a third-rate school could not be compared to the Azure Dragon School, it still had quite some power. To be able to exterminate them showed that the Wings Alliance were very strong. Also, although the founders of the World Alliance and the Sword Alliance are very strong, but compared to the founder of the Wings Alliance, there's a huge difference. According to the rumors, the founder of the Wings Alliance entered the inner court at the age of 11, became a core disciple at the age of 14, and was the one disciple at the age of 16 in the Azure Dragon School. But sadly, he is no longer in the Azure Dragon School. In the year that he was 16, he left this place and no one knew where he went. As he talked about things like that, the younger brother seemed to be rather regretful. Who was that person called? Chu Feng was amazed even more. Core disciples were important figures of the Azure Dragon School, and every one of them could be said to be geniuses in martial cultivation. The founder of the Wings Alliance became the strongest within the core disciples at the age of 16. How outstanding was that person? His name is Zhang Qianni. The younger brother said his name one word at a time. Zhang Qianni. Chu Feng remembered that name because he was qualified to be remembered by Chu Feng. That's right. I heard that our inner court beauty elder Su Ro is also one of the members of the Wings Alliance. And she is also one of the strongest within the core disciples. Also, other than elder Su Ro. Within today's core disciples, there are a lot of people who belong to the Wings Alliance. All of their achievements are not inferior to the founders of the World Alliance or the Sword Alliance. Isn't the Wings Alliance strong? The younger brother continued saying. If you say it like that, then this Wings Alliance is really strong. Are there any special symbols for the members of the Wings Alliance? Chu Feng was getting more and more interested in this Wings Alliance. It's rare to see anyone from the Wings Alliance. But on their chest, they would wear a small badge. And a pair of wings are on that badge. The three of them chatted as they walked. And soon, they arrived at the plaza that was filled with people. It was the place to register for the spiritual medicine hunt. Actually, the so-called registration was writing your own name on a wall scroll, then taking a token. There were no elders there. Junior, the spiritual medicine hunt starts tomorrow. So, I'm thinking that you should join in an alliance and request for shelter. I'll give you a word of advice. Don't think of joining an alliance like the Wings Alliance, because we won't even have a single chance in our lifetime. No need to even mention the Wings Alliance. The World Alliance and the Sword Alliance are not easy to enter as well. So, if you want to join an alliance, you need to keep your eyes open. After registering, the two brothers started to take advantage of the mood again. Please give me some pointers. Seeing that the brothers were so friendly, Chu Feng couldn't bear to not give them face. Although the stronger alliances are harder to enter, you cannot choose a weak one. For example, you should never enter those who say how good their alliance are to one person after the other. Those alliances could not even protect you, and you would only get bullied. Like that girl who's giving bamboo sheets to everyone. With a glance, you could tell that she's from some weak little alliance and they're here to trick the new disciples. Saying that, the elder brother pointed towards a purple-clothed young female from nearby. Looking over to the direction that he was pointing at, Chu Feng couldn't help but look blankly. That purple-clothed young female was Chu Yu. Chu Yu. Seeing her, Chu Feng yelled excitedly. After hearing Chu Feng's yells, Chu Yu turned her head to look. When she saw Chu Feng, she also was joyful, and as she waved, she yelled, Chu Feng. Chu Feng wanted to find Chu Yu, but he never would have thought that they would meet at a place like that. So, he hurriedly walked over to Chu Yu. Ah, he's finished. Another idiot has been tricked. We've wasted our time after talking to him for so long. Seeing that, the pair of brothers looked at each other with their 4 eyes and shook their head. Chu Feng, you finally entered the inner court. This is great. We can finally start training together. As she looked at Chu Feng's purple clothing, Chu Yu was so happy that her heart could jump. From the bottom of her heart, she was happy for Chu Feng. Chu Yu, what are you doing? Chu Feng was fairly curious as he gazed at the bamboo sheets. Oh, you still don't know, huh? Chu Wei created an alliance in the inner court called the Chu Alliance. All the people from the Chu family are in this Chu Alliance. But even so, there are still too little people in our alliance. So, taking advantage of this year's new disciples that are entering the inner court, I want to try to pull some more people to enter our Chu Alliance and increase our power. After all, if the Chu Alliance has a good development in the future, it will help our Chu family greatly. Chu Yu explained while smiling. The Chu Wei that Chu Yu mentioned was a young elder brother in the Chu family. He was 20 years old this year. And 10 years ago, he entered the Azure Dragon School. However, Chu Feng did not have a good impression on that Chu Wei, as Chu Wei was one of the people that bullied him a lot when he was younger. I'll help you. Although he didn't like Chu Wei, Chu Feng didn't want Chu Yu to work too hard. It's fine. It's really fine. You don't understand the situation in the Chu Alliance, so I can do it myself. Chu Yu smiled while declining, then asked with concern. That's right. Chu Feng, did you register in the spiritual medicine hunt? Look at this. Chu Feng smiled and took out the token for the spiritual medicine hunt. That's great. This time, I can go with you and catch the spiritual medicines. I'll tell you this. Catching the spiritual medicine is a battle of wits and bravery, and it's very interesting. As she mentioned the spiritual medicine hunt, Chu Yu seemed to really look forward to it. Chu Feng, I'll be getting busy at night. Come and find me. I have something that I want to say to you, so you have to come. Chu Yu saw another new disciple walking past, so she quickly stuffed a bamboo sheet into Chu Feng's hands and walked over to that new disciple and introduced the Chu Alliance to him. Seeing Chu Yu insisting like that, Chu Feng didn't force the issue. On that bamboo sheet, the location of Chu Yu's residence was written on it. Walking in the plaza and scanning through the crowds, he found out that there were quite a few people who were like Chu Yu that advertised their alliance. But very little people cared about them, since everyone wasn't an idiot. Unless they couldn't enter the stronger alliances, very little people would choose to join small alliances like that. The so-called Chu Alliance only had Chu Yu herself recruiting members. Even the founder, Chu Wei, did not appear. It showed that only Chu Yu thought about the Chu family. Night came, so Chu Feng went to Chu Yu's residence as planned. Chu Yu was walking back and forth outside the residence, and it was obvious that she was waiting for someone. When Chu Yu saw Chu Feng, she put both of her hands behind her back while skipping and jumping her way over. Although Chu Yu was 1 year older than Chu Feng, she was still at the prime of her youth. Not only was her appearance beautiful, her character was also lively and cheerful. In the Chu family, Chu Yu could be said to be a clown. No matter if it was the old or young, they all liked this little strange girl. As she arrived in front of Chu Feng, Chu Yu opened her hands and said while laughing, "Hey, hurry and pick it up." Between her two white palms was a Saint Spirit grass. Martial God Asura. Chapter 9. I testify for him. Chu Yu. This Chu Feng was speechless. Yes, this is for you from me. And it's my supplement for this year. As Chu Yu spoke, she forced the Saint Spirit grass into Chu Feng's hands. If it's like that, I can't have it. Did you forget that I still owe you 2 Saint Spirit grasses? Chu Feng pushed the Saint Spirit grass back. And as he said that, he pulled one out from his pocket. Chu Feng, you didn't refine the Saint Spirit grass? Looking at the intact Saint Spirit grass, Chu Yu thought that it was the one that she gave Chu Feng. I've already broke through, so I don't need it for now. I might as well return it back to you. How can I take your Saint Spirit grass? These are yours. So hurry up and take it. Chu Yu. I said that I would return too. So I will return too. Didn't you promise as well? You're making things very hard for me when you're like this. But you didn't even use the Saint Spirit grass that you gave me. And instead, you give me yours. Isn't that just me taking advantage of you? Chu Yu. I understand your kind meanings. In the entire Chu family, besides my elder brother and my father, you treat me the best. Just view this as a younger brother showing you respect. That was said from the bottom of Chu Feng's heart. Everyone in the Chu family pushed him aside. So it really moved him when Chu Yu could treat him with kindness. Seeing that Chu Feng was so determined. On Chu Yu's face, colors of shame emerged on her face as she said quietly, Chu Feng, you doing this really makes me feel very ashamed. Actually, this Saint Spirit grass isn't from me. Chu Guyu asked me to represent him to give it to you. My brother? Chu Feng couldn't help but look blankly for a moment. Chu Guyu was Chu Yuan's blood-related child and he was Chu Feng's elder brother. He was training in the Lingyun school, the one school in the Azure province. He was at the 6th level of the spirit realm at the age of 17 and he was the strongest person in the Chu family's young generation. Although Chu Feng wasn't Chu Yuan's blood-related child, Chu Guyu still treated him as his own younger brother. And he was one of the most respected and loved people by Chu Feng. He was afraid that you would be burdened. So he instructed me to not say that it was from him. But now, I have to say the truth. Chu Yu's face was red. And it could be seen that she was really ashamed. Chu Yu. Even so, I still have to thank you. Although this Saint Spirit grass may not be from you, your feelings from all these years towards me are. Like I said, just take it as your younger brother giving respect to you by giving these 2 Saint Spirit grasses to you. Besides, you're going to enter the 5th level of the spirit realm soon, so this Saint Spirit grass is more important to you. Because of that, don't refuse this Saint Spirit grass. Chu Feng still firmly continued to put the Saint Spirit grass in Chu Yu's hands. In that case, I'll only look at this as me borrowing a Saint Spirit grass. But I can only borrow one because I can only afford to give one back. Seeing Chu Feng so insisted, Chu Yu gnashed her teeth and she could only take one of the Saint Spirit grass. In reality, what Chu Feng said was correct. Chu Yu was going to enter the 5th level of the spirit realm soon, and at that moment, it was a crucial stage. This Saint Spirit grass was indeed very important to her. Dun Chu Feng smiled. That's right. Chu Feng. Chu Guyu had a letter that he wanted me to give to you. Chu Yu took a letter out from her waist. As he accepted the letter, Chu Feng felt a burst of emotions. He hadn't returned to the Chu family in 5 years, which meant that he hadn't seen his father and his elder brother in 5 years. He did not return because he felt that he was too shameful to see them. But in the 5 years, his brother and his father would write him a letter almost every single month. It showed how those two thought of Chu Feng. Okay, read the letter when you get back. Hurry up and follow me because today is a good day. Chu Yu grabbed Chu Feng's arms and pulled him towards the residence. But before even getting close, Chu Feng started frowning. He heard lots of familiar sounds in the residence, and those were all people that he did not like. Indeed, in the instant that the door to the residence opened, there were 32 faces there. A large portion of them were familiar faces. And almost all the members of the Chu family who were disciples of the Azure Dragon School were here. As for the few strangers, Chu Feng could guess where they came from. They must be the new members of the Chu Alliance. Everyone, see who's here! Chu Yu yelled happily, when the gazes of the crowd were cast over to that direction. Chu Feng could feel that they was filled with disdain and hate. Oh, I wondered who it was. Isn't it the person who performed outstanding deeds to our Chu family? One youth walked over to Chu Feng. It was Chu Cheng. And he was Chu Zhen's elder brother. He entered the Azure Dragon School at the same time as Chu Yu. And he was also in the 4th level of the spirit realm. Chu Feng, you've done the deeds. You know that? Chu Cheng pointed at Chu Feng and his gaze was not kind. Chu Cheng, what are you talking about? Today is a rejoiceful day, so don't speak nonsense. Chu Yu quickly spoke. What's wrong, Chu Yu? You're not letting me talk about all his deeds? Chu Cheng shot Chu Yu a glance, then looked at Chu Feng. Chu Feng, did you know that you've done the deeds? Damn, you've done great deeds. You've stayed as an outer court disciple for 5 years in the Azure Dragon School and you have disgraced the Chu family. But even so, you still have face to join in this Chu Alliance gathering. How thick is the skin of your face? Chu Cheng, shut up. Chu Yu was a bit angry. But before letting her say any more, Chu Feng pulled her. Chu Feng's face did not change. But at the end he lightly smiled and said, You're thinking too much. I have no interest in your gathering. I am demanding a payment here today. Payment? What payment? After hearing those words, Chu Cheng's face instantly changed. That's quite funny. A person taken in my Chu family is actually demanding a payment from the Chu family. Do you not know who gave you what you have right now? That's right. Too shameless. At the same time, the people from the Chu family started criticizing Chu Feng. Chu Feng ignored the words of the crowd. And as he walked into the residence, he said, A few days ago, a certain person made a bet with me. And bet that I wouldn't pass the inner court disciple exam. He even said if he lost, he would give the yearly supplemented Saint Spirit grass to me. Chu Zhen, you didn't forget about that, right? Chu Feng stopped in front of Chu Zhen. Chu Zhen was sitting on a chair while chewing on some fruits in his mouth. However, the corner of his mouth twitched and his face was extremely ugly. Of course, Chu Zhen did not forget the things that he said that day, since he was afraid that Chu Feng would mention that matter. He honestly stayed here. Or else, with his temper, he would have searched Chu Feng out for trouble already. Chu Feng, you need evidence for your words. Just at that time, a young man next to Chu Zhen opened his mouth. In the residence, most of the males and females were as old as Chu Feng. But this young man was not. Indeed, he was Chu Wei. Chu Wei is correct. If you made a bet with Chu Zhen, you need to pull out the evidence or else you are only spitting out false accusations. Chu Chang yelled out first because he was Chu Zhen's elder brother. That's right. Take out the evidence. Or else don't think of walking out here today. After Chu Chang, pretty much everyone from the Chu family in the hall started yelling. Even the non-Chu family members also joined in. Although they were not be part of the Chu family, they could tell that Chu Feng's position in the Chu family was very low. If his own family was looking down on him, then naturally, they would as well. I testify for Chu Feng. But just at that time, Chu Yu, who did not speak for a long time, suddenly spoke. Martial God Asura. Chapter 10, Failing to Honor a Debt. At that instant, the hall went into complete silence and all the gazes were cast towards Chu Yu. Chu Yu. What did you say? You cannot speak such nonsense to testify. As Chu Wei said that, his dense gaze was filled with implications of warning. His meaning was very clear and it was to make Chu Yu say the truth. I am not speaking nonsense. That day, when Chu Zhen and Chu Feng made the bet, I was there and it was even Chu Zhen who let me be a witness. After that, Chu Yu was not afraid of Chu Wei at all. She stood next to Chu Feng, as if hiddenly telling the crowd which side she was standing on. At that moment, not only Chu Zhen, even Chu Chang, Chu Wei and most of the Chu family's faces were starting to change. They never would have thought that Chu Yu would do this for Chu Feng, and she was even willing to go against the entire Chu family crowd. In reality, even Chu Feng felt a bit surprised since, by doing this, Chu Yu would offend a lot of people. But other than that, Chu Feng felt moved. Chu Zhen, are you failing to honor your debt? Chu Feng continued to pressure him, with Chu Yu as a witness. He did not believe that Chu Zhen would deny it. Chu Zhen's face was extremely ugly and he did not know how to reply. Every year, the family only supplemented one Saint Spirit grass. Other than the one, they did not have any other chances to get such a good spiritual medicine. He just got his supplemented Saint Spirit grass and Chu Zhen was preparing to use it to make a breakthrough into the 4th level of the spirit realm. How could he give it up to someone? So what if it's true? You entered the Azure Dragon School at the same time as Chu Zhen. He already entered the inner court 2 years ago and you are a full 2 years late. What, after using that much time to enter the inner court? You're still arrogant? You want to extort Chu Zhen's supplement? Chu Chang coldly smiled and cunningly argued. As Chu Zhen's elder brother, it was obvious that he wouldn't let Chu Feng take away his brother's supplement. Don't tell me that. Your brother should know what is happening. If you are failing to honor your debt, just admit it. I can forget about it. But you need him to personally admit that his words are like fart and they are absolutely untrustable. Chu Feng did not let him go. You with those words. Chu Zhen was really gnashing his teeth out of anger, yet he could not refute him since it was true. Haha. Jokes. Failing to honor a debt? Have I ever mentioned anything about that? You can have Chu Zhen's Saint Spirit grass. But you need to admit in front of the crowd that you are a useless garbage. An idiot that needed 5 years to enter the inner court. Everyone, am I correct? Chu Chang yelled loudly. That's right. Chu Chang is right. That's right. If you want to take the Saint Spirit grass, you need to admit that you are garbage. As long as you admit it, then we'll just give it as pity to a beggar. Chu Chang raised his hands and yelled. And naturally, everyone yelled in response. In the Chu family, excluding Chu Yuan, Chu Guyu and Chu Yu, pretty much no one liked Chu Feng and they all wanted him out of the Chu family. So no matter how excessive it was, as long as it was related to Chu Feng, they would support it. They all wanted Chu Feng to feel horrible. Chu Chang, don't create trouble without a reason. This is a private matter between Chu Jin and Chu Feng, so all of you are not qualified to interrupt. Chu Yu scolded. We are not qualified. Yet you are? You are the elder sister of Chu Jin. But even so, you supported an outsider. Are you still even part of the Chu family? Chu Chang maliciously and fiercely refuted. I only look at the case and not the person. In any case, Chu Feng is not an outsider. He is part of the Chu family. You clearly know whether or not he is part of the Chu family. However, I can tell you that Chu Jin is your own brother. You don't even bother to reason. Chu Yu was so angered by Chu Chang that her entire body was trembling. But just at that time, Chu Feng put his hands on Chu Yu's shoulders and moved her behind him. Although the current Chu Feng had the same smile as always on his face, his gaze became serious and he said calmly, I will only ask you one question. Will you give this Saint Spirit grass to me, or no? Ho Chu Feng, don't say that we are making things hard for you. But you really are not qualified to take Chu Jin's Saint Spirit grass. How about this? I'll give you a chance. Duel a bit with Chu Jin. If you win, that shows that you are qualified to take away this Saint Spirit grass. Chu Yu, don't say that I'm not speaking reason. I'll even take my own Saint Spirit grass out. If Chu Feng can win, then these are all his. While saying that, Chu Chang put the Saint Spirit grass from his pocket onto the table. Also at the same time, Chu Chang shot a glance at Chu Jin. Chu Jin instantly understood and he also put his Saint Spirit grass onto the table. Chu Jin, you've entered the inner court for 2 years. And you've also cultivated 2 skills. On the other hand, Chu Feng just entered the inner court. Don't you feel ashamed dueling with him? You just aren't willing to give it up. Chu Yu still felt that it was unfair towards Chu Feng. Shut up. You don't have any part in this. Chu Chang threateningly pointed at Chu Yu, then narrowed his eyes and looked at Chu Feng. But if you lose, bring your Saint Spirit grass out. Do you dare? At that instant, all the eyes landed on Chu Feng and they were waiting for his reply. If Chu Feng refused, they could humiliate Chu Feng and say that he was a coward. If Chu Feng agreed, Chu Jin could openly give Chu Feng a lesson. No matter what, Chu Feng was in a dangerous spot. They only wanted to see how Chu Feng would be humiliated. Why wouldn't I dare? Chu Feng smiled and agreed. Good, you have the guts. But let's say this first. Fists and kicks don't have eyes. So you cannot complain about any injuries. Chu Chang's smile became even more despicable. Enough with the rubbish. Come at me. Chu Feng put his own Saint Spirit grass on the table, then walked to the middle of the hall. Chu Feng. Chu Yu pulled on Chu Feng, and those flickering eyes were urging him not to duel with Chu Jin. But Chu Feng pushed away Chu Yu's hands with a smile and said, Trust me. Seeing that, Chu Yu couldn't help but have a blank look. For some reason, she had a feeling that Chu Feng would undoubtedly win this round. Chu Feng and Chu Jin walked towards the middle of the hall and everyone surrounded them. They didn't want to miss out on Chu Feng's humiliation. Chu Feng. It seems that you want the riches but not your life. The Chu Jin that hadn't spoken a long time finally had a smile on his face. But his smile was very evil. Being forced into the embarrassing situation by Chu Feng made him very unhappy, since he had a chance to teach Chu Feng a lesson. Obviously, he wouldn't restrain himself. Ho ho, Chu Feng lightly smiled then said, I just wanted to say those words to you. You talk too big. Today, I'll let you know how weak you are. Suddenly, Chu Jin's left feet stepped forward. One could only hear a boom before his entire body ran with flying speed. Both his arms were moving and his punches were flying everywhere. Powerful aura came from his body and he was like a wild, fierce beast as he headed towards Chu Feng.